Good afternoon, fellow biologists. This is Mr. Ebb with today's lesson on four-question strategy. The four-question strategy is a technique for generating research questions. With the four-question strategy, I can quickly generate 50 to 100 research questions without too much sweat. If I told you tomorrow we're going to do investigations on frogs and ask you to come up with a research question, and that's all I gave you, most of you would probably have a hard time coming up with 2 or 3. But by using the four-question strategy technique, we can come up with dozens to 50 to 100. So we're going to walk you through a sample four-question strategy that you should fill in or complete as we go. And then we're going to do a second one, which is going to actually lead to your first real research project. So let me share this with you. I'll share my screen. So I'm going into Google Classroom. Here's Google Classroom. And I'm going down here to ED4, four-question strategy. We're going to do the first one together. And then I'll get you started on the second one, and you'll finish that before the next class period. So four-question strategy. Yeah, it's still filled in from the previous hour. So let me pull some of this out. It's easier if I walk you back through it. Sorry, I should have cleared that the first time. Okay. Let's take a look at it. So it's a real original title. It's called Four-Question Strategy because there's 4 questions. So I just randomly chose goldfish. Don't ask me why, probably because there's a couple goldfish in the tank over on the other side of the room, and I just chose it as a sample topic. So the first question says, what materials are readily available for conducting experiments on goldfish? And so in class, we brainstormed some things you could get if you wanted to work with goldfish. So think for a second, what are some things you could easily get a hold of if you were going to work with goldfish? Yes, we could get a hold of goldfish. If you're going to do a project on goldfish, you need goldfish. We could get a hold of a tank. We could get a hold of water. We could get a hold of a light, a filter, food, gravel, plants. Think of all the things you might put into a tank. And so if I really pushed it, if I really gave you more time to think, we could probably come up with a slightly bigger list, but this is a good enough list for right now because we're just demonstrating how to use the tool. The second question says, how do goldfish act? What do goldfish actually do? So think for a second, what do goldfish do? What are some things goldfish do that you could either observe or measure? And so in the classes today, we came up with they swim, they eat, they breathe. If they eat, eventually they poop. Fix that. They use energy. And again, if I pushed it, we can come up with more and more ideas. So now what we do that we've got the first 2 questions, and the key is the more items you can come up with in question 1 and the more items you can come up with in question 2, the more research questions you're going to be able to generate. So what I'm going to do is number 1 connects to number 3. 1 connects to 3. So I'm going to take the items from number 1 and I'm going to put them into the first column: goldfish, tank, water. They're going to each get their own column. Light, filter, food, gravel, plants. So in this case, I didn't fill up all the columns. That's okay. And then what I'm going to do for each one of these is I'm going to list the different ways I could change these. It says, how can you change the set of goldfish materials to affect the action? So what about the goldfish could I choose or change or select? Think for a moment. What about the goldfish could you change? I could change the type of goldfish. I could change the size of the goldfish. I could change the age of the goldfish. Tank. I could change the size of the tank. I could change the shape of the tank. I could change the material the tank is made of. Water, I could change the amount of water. I could change the type of water. I could change the temperature of the water. I could change the pH of the water. I could change the salinity, the salt content of the water. I could change the source of the water. Again, we try to come up with things as best we can. Another thing on goldfish, I could change the gender. Lights, what about the lights could I change? I could change the type of light. I could change the amount of light. I could change the intensity of light. I could change the color of light. I could change the angle of light. A filter, I could change the type of filter. I could change the type of cartridge used by the filter, what materials are going into the filter cartridge. I could change the power of the pump in the filter. Food, what I could change? I could change the amount of food. I could change the type of food. I could change the color of the food. I could change the size of the individual food pieces. I could change the ingredients of the food. So you can see I'm just brainstorming all the different things that I could potentially change about each one of these things. Gravel, I could change the size of the gravel, the amount of the gravel, the depth of the gravel, the color of the gravel. Plants, if we're putting plants in, let's say we're going to be using live plants, I could change the species of plant. I could use the size of the plant, the age of the plant, the color of the plant, et cetera, et cetera. And again, if I push this and kept brainstorming, we could fill in even more ideas. But I think you get the idea of what we're trying to do. So then we would go to the next step, which is taking number 2 and connecting to number 4. 2 connects to 4. So similar idea, I'm going to put all the items from 2 into their own columns. So swim, eat, breathe, poop, use energy. And then I'm going to look at what can I measure or observe or describe about these things. So what about swimming could I measure or observe or describe? Think for a moment. What about swimming could I measure, observe, or describe? So some of the ones we came up today with are rate, how fast it swims, the rate at which it swims, where it swims. Is it a top swimmer, bottom swimmer, middle level swimmer? The pattern, does it swim straight lines? Does it swim in circles, figure eights, zigzags? How often does it swim? The duration of the swim before it stops and rests. Eating, how much does it eat? What does it eat? How often does it eat? Where does it eat? Again, does it feed from the top? Does it feed from the bottom? Does it feed from the middle? Breathe, the rate of breathing. How often those gills open and close. Very similar, how often, there may not be much difference there, how often it breathes, okay? Poop, how much poop does it make? How often does it poop? What's the mass of the poop? What's the length of the poop? What's the color of the poop? all things that could be measured. Energy, the rate of energy use. When does it spend its energy? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, if I pushed it, I could come up with more and more ideas to fill those in. And if we were going to actually carry this particular project out, which unfortunately with goldfish, we don't have the space, money, or resources to carry it out, I would fill this in more complete detail. But what we've just generated, all of these things right here, all of these things that we've just generated, these are what? These are all potential variables. These are all potential variables. Up here are variables I can change. So that makes that what type of variable? Since I can change it, it makes it an independent variable. This is my potential IV. Let's just make that more noticeable to you. So that is a potential independent variable. Whereas number 4, those are things I can monitor, observe, record. Those are possible dependent variables. So I've got independent variables and I've got dependent variables. That means essentially I could take anything from number 3 and match it with anything for number 4 and come up with a research question. Now, some will be better than others. You might get a few silly questions, but for the most part, these are all doable. So I could take anything I want. I could take, how does the age of the goldfish affect how often it poops? How does the size of the tank affect the rate at which the fish swims? How does the temperature of the water affect how much it eats? How does the intensity of light affect the rate of energy use? How does the size of the food affect the mass of the poop? How does the depth of the gravel affect the pattern of swimming? Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I'm just taking one thing from up here, like how does the pH of the water affect, how much it eats? So you can see that I'm doing that. So we're going to ask you to take that chart and come up with 3 research questions. So how does, plug in an independent variable. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to take temperature of water. How does the temperature of the water affect the, let's say, rate at which the fish swims, which the goldfish swims. And make sure it's a question. So I'm going to let you fill in the other 2 potential questions. And then once you've filled those 2 potential questions in, pick the one of the 3 you like the best and complete the design diagram. Right? Complete the design diagram. So you need to finish that off, and that will be part of what you submit. So my research question, say I pick this one, I could just cut and paste it if I'm typing. So that's my research question. I'm going to turn that into a title such as the effects of temperature, the effects of the temperature of the water on the rate at which fish breathe. I just turn it into a statement. My null hypothesis would state that the temperature has no effect on the rate at which the fish swims. Your null states what you're doing will have no effect. The alternative says the temperature of the water will affect the rate at which the fish swims. So we're trying to gather data to reject the null and support the alternative. For the independent variable, I want you to divide that into 3 or 4. Now, you may not know the precise temperatures or the precise pHs. You can be more generic at this point because we're still at the proposal point. So for independent variable, I might put in, for the temperature I'm going to use a cold temperature. I'm going to use a room temperature, and I'm going to use a hot temperature. Okay. I can come back later and add the actual degrees once I figure out what the degrees are going to be. You have to do at least 3 divisions, up to 4 at the most. Whoops, I put that in the wrong spot, sorry. That's the levels. So here I would put temperature of the water. That is what I'm choosing to change. Okay. Trials, you want to have more than one trial, so I'll let you decide. Maybe you're going to set up 5 tanks of each. So we'll do 5 trials, 5 trials, 5 trials. Your dependent variable in this case would be the swimming rate of the fish, which you should give some units, like how many centimeters it swims per minute, how many inches it swims per minute, how many millimeters it swims per minute. And then the constants, where do the constants come from? You go back up here. Number 3, all the things you didn't pick, those become constants. So I picked temperature of water. That means everything else in all these columns needs to be kept the same. So I want you to pick like the top 8 to 10 things you would keep the same. So I need the same size tank. I need the same species of fish. I need the same amount of water. Those all would be constants that I would put into the chart. So I hope that makes some sense to you. That would be our practice example. That would be our practice example. Once you've completed that, if you're doing it on paper, you can take photos of it. If you're not doing it on paper, don't submit yet, because we're going to go to the second document. So I'm going to go back to the second document. And this is the one that we're going to actually do for the lab investigation. And I probably forgot to erase this one too. Okay. So I'll get you started on this one, and then you're going to take it from there. So this time now, the one we're going to actually do is seeds. Yes, I get it. Goldfish is probably going to be much more exciting. Seeds sound like they're boring, but don't underestimate plants. Plants are awesome. And plants do all types of crazy stuff. And seeds are a very viable source of research. So we're going to be particularly using black bean seeds, because those are just what I have available. And so in the last hour of the day today, we brainstormed these ideas. You know, what about the bean? What can you get to do experiments on seeds? Well, I can get water, I can get light, I can get substrate. Substrate is it's more of a generic name for things like soil. I can get fertilizer, I can get seeds, I can get containers. And then what do seeds do? Well, we came up with the idea that seeds grow. Seeds use energy, they use oxygen, they germinate. Germinate is when the roots and the stems first emerge from the seed. Growth is what happens after they emerge. They absorb water. And so then we went through and we broke these down. What could I change about the water? The type, the amount, the salinity, the temperature, the pH. The light, I can change the amount, the type, the brightness, the duration, the distance, the color. And so you can see we broke all of these down. And then we did the same for germinate, grow, use energy, use oxygen, and absorb water. We broke those down. What can we measure or observe or record about these? And so here again is your independent variable right here. Question 3 is your independent variable. And then question 4 are your potential dependent variables. I'm going to put IV right there and DV just to remind you. IVs come from question 3. The DV comes from question 4. Now, because this is the first research project we're going to set up, I'm going to control a few things. You're not going to have complete control the first time. It probably won't be to the 3rd or 4th time that you have complete control of the design. So you notice then under germinate, the word number is highlighted in yellow. I am choosing that as the dependent variable for every group. Every team is going to use the number of seeds germinated as our dependent variable. You're going to pick any independent variable you want from question 3 to match up with that. So that would be, how does the salinity of the water affect the number of seeds germinating? How does the temperature of the water affect the number of seeds germinating? How does the pH of the water affect the number of seeds germinating? How does the color of light affect the number of seeds germinating? How does the type of substrate affect the number of seeds germinating? How does the amount of fertilizer affect the number of seeds germinating? How does the spacing of the seeds affect the number of seeds germinating? How does the shape of the container affect the number of seeds germinating? So everybody's commonality will be the number of seeds germinating. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to, again, develop 3 research questions. I strongly encourage you to look for variables you don't actually know the answer to. It makes it more interesting if you don't actually know the answer. You're actually going to do research to gather information to actually answer something you don't know. And also try to pick ones that I know, again, 14, 15 years old, this is not going to set your world on fire, but try to pick things that you at least have a vague interest in, right? And come up with 3 research questions. Once you've come up with the 3 research questions, pick the one you are most interested in testing and complete the design diagram. So maybe you're most interested in testing the salinity of the water. How does the salinity of the salt in the water affect the number of seeds germinated? So you're going to put that in here, complete this. And again, for the level of variables, you may have to just make an approximation. Eventually, we would figure out a percent or amount of salt, but you can put low level of salt, medium level of salt, high level of salt, and very high level of salt, or something along that lines. Again, you're at proposal stage. So what's going to happen on Wednesday is you're going to be put into teams. Everybody in the team is going to share their proposed experimental design. As a team, you're going to select the one you guys are most interested in pursuing, and then you'll do the full proposal so we can get the research project up and running. So your task is to complete the rest of these sheets, particularly the research questions and the experimental design diagrams, and submit that by tomorrow night or whatever the date is on your particular class page, because again, it varies because different classes are meeting different days. But please have it in. This one needs to be in on time because you need to be able to share it with the rest of your classmates on either Wednesday or Thursday, depending on which hour you're in. First and second hour, it's going to be Wednesday. Fifth and sixth hour, it's going to be Thursday. All right, that should hopefully get you through ED4. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.